Blueprints are a game changer in Satisfactory, and in this series, we'll be creating entire factories inside of these blueprints. Just plop them down, hook them up, and there you have it, a fully functional factory in seconds. Everything from the machines used, the power consumption, the resources required, and the items being produced will be mentioned throughout the video. Leave a comment down below for what you would like to see in the next episode. Very quick breakdown of blueprints. You can find them in phase 2 or tier 4 of the hub where it says Fix It Blueprints. There is a Mark 1, there is also a Mark 2, and a Mark 3. However, for today's examples and throughout this series, I'll just be using the Mark 1 so that everyone at home can easily follow along. What you see on screen is the difference between the three. My name's the Valhalla Pickle, and this is the easiest blueprint factories in Satisfactory 1.0. What we see right here is our Rotor Blueprint. There's 3 floors in total for this blueprint. Firstly, we've got the smelters. We then have all of our constructors. And lastly, we have our assemblers. To make things nice and simple, we split everything into 3 different floors. This makes the tutorial nice and easy to try and understand. In this project, we are consuming 74 megawatts of power. This is because we are using 4 smelters, 7 constructors, and 2 assemblers. In total, we are making 8 rotors per minute and consuming just 90 iron ore per minute. And then at the very end of the video, I'll show you what this thing looks like when it's actually producing all of our rotors. Let's start with floor number 1. And luckily, because we're only using 4 smelters, we've got a lot of room to work with here. By the entrance, we've got 2 different signs. One showing you the item that's going in, and the second showing you how many of this item's going in. So we can see we've got iron ore with an input at 90 iron ore per minute. And this is where it all comes in. We've split our 4 smelters in 2 different ways. These 2 smelters go produce our screws, whereas these 2 produce our iron rods. These 2 smelters are producing 40 iron ingots per minute, whereas these 2 smelters are producing 50 iron ingots per minute. Eventually, these 2 conveyor belts join together to go up to the 2nd floor. As you might have noticed, because we've only got 4 smelters here, we've been able to add quite a lot of these walkways up here. This gives us multiple different lines of elevation, which I feel like adds a good sense of realism. And of course, to make it realistic, we've got 1 door that's located right there. Then when you come back around up this catwalk or pathway, whatever you like to call it, we then have 2 more entrances, as you might have seen in my last couple of blueprint videos. Both of them linked to the exact same place. It's just a nice little balcony area to get a nice view of everything so far. Again, they can both be connected and joined through here, and through the outside as well. If you were to approach this blueprint from this angle instead, you could also see that we appear to have some sort of crafting bench underneath here, which I think looks really cool. This allows you to craft a bunch of different items. That is floor number 1 essentially completed, so let's go see floor number 2. And here it is, floor number 2. We are using the hover pack, by the way, for this video. Do you guys prefer the hover pack? Let me know in the comments down below. Hopefully it's able to make things a little bit easier to understand. Very quickly, if you are enjoying this series so far, feel free to subscribe. You don't have to, but it'll just notify you whenever I upload more of these episodes. Anyway, back to the video. But here we can see we have got 7 constructors. These 3 constructors are producing our iron rods, whereas these 4 constructors are producing our screws. The reason as to why I've done this is rather simple. And that's because we are using something called cast screws, which means that we can turn our iron ingots straight into our screws without having to make extra iron rods like what we've got going on over here. This would require a lot more constructors, which requires more room and of course ends up using more power. So the cast screw recipe is definitely a must-have for this project. These are our 2 entrances for our iron ingots, going to create the iron rods over here, and the screws over there. Eventually, these things both join together again, and our screws go up there, and then our iron rods also continue up here to floor number 3, which we'll talk about right now. That is because we have got our assembler stage, and because we're only using 2 assemblers, we have got so much room to work with. Again, we are only using Mark 1 blueprints here. This is not a Mark 2 or a Mark 3. This is literally a Mark 1 4x4 blueprint. Our screws and our iron rods come up from here, and simply put, they just go straight into the assemblers, no funny business. Yes, it might look like our power's floating, but again, it's not. There is a roof here, so I promise it's not floating. Each one of these assemblers consumes 20 iron rods per minute and 100 screws per minute to make our 4 rotors. These then join together, and we have got ourselves a splitter. No, it's not, it's a merger. These 2 assemblers then merge together to go straight into this storage container. When it goes into the storage container, 9 times out of 10, it will stop. But to begin with, because there won't be anything along here, it will continue up and over this conveyor belt. And then from the conveyor belt into our dimensional depot uploader. Of course, this is 1.0 now. We can be using a bunch of these 1.0 features like the dimensional depot, which I think looks really, really cool. Not to mention, it generally is a fantastic feature. Let's say, for argument's sake, this entire conveyor belt line is now filled up. All of our rotors will then be collected in our storage container, where we can manually just come and collect it. But then let's say this storage container then fills up. Well, you've got 2 different choices here. What you could do is you could add a splitter, or a smart splitter preferably, into here, then add another conveyor belt going out of your blueprint, then you can build an awesome sink if you so wish to sink all of your items. Or what you could do is let everything here back up, which might sound a bit weird, but if none of this is actually working because you've got full storage, it probably means you don't need any more of this item, and of course it saves you on power. If the machines aren't operational, they won't consume power. That's the reason, as you can see, my maximum consumption in my save is currently about 17,684.6. But my actual consumption is below 10,000. That's because a lot of my machines have produced the maximum amount of items that I need, and I don't need any more of it. So you can sink it, which will of course cost you more power to add in the awesome sinks, or you could just do what I've done, which is just leave everything the way it is. And that is this blueprint broken down into 3 different floors. Let's go see what this thing actually looks like when it's properly functional and properly operational, which luckily, we can just see it over there. And here we are. As we can see, we have got 90 iron per minute flowing into this thing. But of course, we can use this side door here. As we can see, the iron ore is perfectly going into these smelters, which is producing the exact amount of iron ingots that we need. We get a pretty nice view of this thing over here as well. I don't know why I've made this a Mark II belt. It doesn't actually have to be a Mark II belt. The reason why I've painted everything in here white with a hint of orange is just to break the contrast of having too much dark or grey colours everywhere, so the white just adds a bit of brightness inside this build. But of course, for the exterior shell and for the inside colours, paint it whatever you feel is best. The iron ingots are flowing in perfectly. Our screws are all being produced, as well as our iron rods. And this is what I was mentioning earlier with our quote-unquote floating power grid. It's not floating, it's definitely attached to the ceiling above, but it does look like it's floating when, of course, I've removed the previous floor from above. But that is the reason why it does that, so don't worry. And of course, for our final floor, the screws and the rods are all flowing perfectly into here. We had a bit of an error earlier on, but we managed to fix it with the screws. And then again, the rotors will perfectly come down into here for now, and it should hopefully be filling up here. It is great, 91. But the reason why it says there's no space left in the depot is actually rather simple. It's because if we go into here and go into rotors, this is completely filled up. If this wasn't filled up, as I will technically show you right now, this will then start to upload. If you'd like more information about the depots, please watch this video on screen. But again, if this was all starting to back up, it will just get stored into this storage container, which is perfect. That is a Rotor Blueprint factory. Thank you for watching. But before we go, a massive thank you to our members, Mau Mau, Skull and Hattie, Lo, Nitormal, Chaos Rising, Cutthroat Zoo, Yamikel, and Tio Rico.